Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and if you missed the first week of the JLT Community Series, then kick back, grab yourself a nice beverage, throw the earphones in and tune in. Shorty's got you covered. We're going to scan our way through some of the key stats, the key players for SuperCoach, and cast our eye over what was great to see footy back in action on the screen. So, firstly, I would like to put in a little disclaimer that these are just glorified practice matches. Let's not get carried away. Let's not pull the trigger and tinker with our sides immediately off the back of one little practice game. Just because it's televised doesn't mean it's any more serious. These are just glorified practice matches, particularly the first week or so. Probably later in the piece, definitely they start to resemble a bit more of a dress rehearsal for a round one side. But certainly at this stage, let's just not get too carried away and too trigger happy. But nonetheless, there were some key takeaway points from the weekend. I'll take a look at each game, a few players that are worth outlining. Some I'll go into more detail than others. I'll try and keep it somewhat concise, but obviously certain players are worth talking about a little bit more than others. But Thursday night saw Essendon take on Collingwood. The Pies ended up storming home to take away the victory there, but it was a Collingwood outfit with minimal of their stars. No Treloar, no Pendlebury, Adams, Grundy or Wells. So that's always worth noting. Another reason why let's not get too carried away, because often there's some key players not only out of the side but also playing different roles and less percentage of game time. But what did I take away from the game? Watson and Hebbel, they were fantastic. They looked really good, worked their way back into the game, which was great to see. They looked like they were just enjoying their footy, which was fantastic. Certainly two players that have been reasonably popular. I've got thoughts on them. I won't be selecting them, but they certainly did look good. I personally don't feel their ceiling is big enough to really burst into absolute premium status, and their price tag would require that, but nonetheless they look good. David Myers played 51% of game time, 8 touches, 2 tackles. He'll just work his way back into the game, and I think, all being well with his body, he'll be a nice little cash cow for us in 2017. Andrew McGrath, now maybe took a little bit to take up the pace of the game, but 9 touches from 63% game time. He'll certainly be better for the run, and got a taste of the real stuff. What he did with the ball looked pretty good, as you'd expect from a number 1 draft pick, but we got our first look at him on the big time. As for the Pies, Lockie Keefe played the 61% of game time, played second fiddle in the ruck to Mason Cox, had the 11 hit-outs, 11 touches, reasonable stats. I watched the game, but not super closely. I was watching it at a mate's place and we had it on, but I wasn't absolutely dissecting it. But, he looked okay. I think just judging by the numbers as well, it gives us enough to work with. Of course, once Grundy comes back into the side, that's probably where we're going to see his true role. But I still feel that he can be a reasonable cash cow at this point in time, whether it's back, pinch hitting a little bit in the ruck, maybe a bit like Lee Brown back in the day. So we'll see how that goes. Matty Scharenberg, 5 touches from his 46% game time. Didn't look fantastic, let's be honest, but he's missed a lot of footy, so we can't be expecting too much. The best thing was that he got through without any sort of injury or niggle to my knowledge, so that's the main thing. Let's not get too concerned about a bloke's touches. He's missed so much footy. Great to see him back out there. Certainly a role for him. Buckley's identified that they want him to be playing that offensive role off half-back, and, given he can show a little bit more throughout the pre-season in these games, I think that role is his, and he's nicely priced alongside Keefe and could be a handy little pickup. Moving away to the Cats versus Hawthorn game, and they just seem to play classics, whether it's in February or September, but a very good game. Cats came back, couldn't quite get the job done, but beaten on the siren by Kate Stewart, who played a pretty impressive game, mind you. But firstly, we'll start with Geelong, and it was Zach Toohey that was the big standout. 33 touches, 25 of them uncontested, but he used it beautifully, 88%, or disposal efficiency, I should say. And he looked really good. Not only the fact that he used it well, but he played with a man who was given the freedom off the half-back line, almost given a licence to take that in-ball kick, run by for the handball receive. Geelong looked like they really wanted the ball in his hands. I probably wouldn't be getting super excited about picking him for the SuperCoach side, because despite a good game on Friday, he still has year upon year upon year of just average scores for the Blues. Year on year, just your 70 to 85. Can he explode with a new role in a new club? Well, he might do, but I'd like to see a little bit more. People are talking Corey Enright role. Only Corey Enright can play the Corey Enright role. Let's not get carried away. But he certainly played the Zach Tui role pretty nicely, and that was rebounding with efficiency and class off the half-back line. So maybe monitor him, because he was very impressive. Otherwise, for the Cats, Aaron Black, he kicked 4 goals. Certainly did his chances. Very good to work his way into a round 1 team. Makes the most of opportunities with a good set-shot kick, and I think he's certainly thoroughly in the mix for a forward line selection in the Cats round 1 side. Thurlow racked up the 18 touches. Great to see him back out there, similar to Scharenberg. Uses the ball pretty nicely. He'll play alongside Tui as those rebounding defenders. Thurlow may play a little more shut down, given Tui has such freedom, but he looked good. Probably not SuperCoach relevant, but Nakai Cockatoo, he could absolutely explode. So keep him on your radar for a SuperCoach draft. If you're in a big league and you really got to start searching deep in those latter stages of your draft, keep Cockatoo on your radar, because I'm not saying for SuperCoach Classic, but certainly drafts, he could just explode and be a really good player for the Cats this year, which we need him to do. Over at Hawthorn, there weren't a number of players to keep an eye on, but 2 key players were certainly Jared Ruffhead and Jager O'Meara, and both impressed. O'Meara, the 12 touches, 9 contested, lined up at the centre bounce, looked good, only played half the game, 47% time on ground, but he looked good. The Hawks were always going to ease him back into it. It's not going to be enough for me to pick him. I'm very strong on the fact that I just don't believe his body will take to the rigours of AFL. Even if he does play the first 5 games, I just don't feel we're going to see a Jager O'Meara at 100% week after week and how he gets up for games. You can check out my player profile on him. But Jared Ruffhead roamed around the ground quite nicely, racked up the 14 touches, snagged a goal. He looked pretty good. I think he's probably going to be a popular selection, and fair enough too, particularly if he does play a more friendly role where he can roam a little bit. I do think he'll play more key post, but certainly Gunston and say Shonemakers and Vickery as well is up there, so might give him a licence to just have a little bit of freedom, and he has shown that he can roam around the ground to great success, so something worth considering there, and he is quite a popular pick, so I'd probably expect him to, certainly stay that way after a good performance. Working our way over to the Greater Western Sydney and West Coast. I really don't think West Coast will have much relevance at all this season. Pritis didn't play, Mitchell didn't play, Shuey, Josh Kennedy, Jack Darling also not appearing. So I didn't take anything away from them, to be honest. I mean, Vardy did a little bit of nice stuff. Redden did a little bit of nice stuff, but look, in a side that has such great and key components out of it, it's very hard to get a gauge. And really, same could be said for the Giants. Notable absentees: Phil Davis, Cornelio, Toby Green, Tom Scully, Dylan Shields, Stevie J, Heath Shaw, Brett DeLeo, Ryan Griffin, Shane Mumford. That's a bloody long list. And look, Joshy Kelly, absolutely fantastic. 150 odd SuperCoach, 29 touches, 9 tackles, 13 contested, 7 clearances. Superstar in the making. Am I going to pick him? No. Reason being, it's just too risky. I mean, he's awkwardly priced. He's as awkward as dancing with your sister on the price tag, and I can't be picking him. I just think the odds of him exploding beyond 108, your 110 mark, I just don't see it happening. And it's just my personal opinion, but I wouldn't be picking a guy in that price range just average 100. I mean, I think it's likely that he'll burst his way beyond 95. He seems to be on that track. But bear in mind as well, so hard to get regular midfield minutes, and there's an enormous rotation of centre bounce setups at the Giants. Just listen to the names I reeled off there as well. You know, there's a lot of guys that roll through there, which I do feel is also why it makes it tough to pick Giants. It's a really interesting thing that we've got with them at the moment. They're the premiership favourites in many people's books, but I don't think many people have that many Giants. I mean, Heath Shaw's in the side for sure, no pun intended, but other than that, there's not going to be stacks. And I think the reason is it's so hard to pinpoint who will be the absolute gun of that side. And furthermore to that, there may not be. I mean, last year, I think the highest averaging player was about 107. So it just suggests that maybe there is no standout gun who averages 115. Could be Shield, could be Canelio, could be Kelly one day. Enormous risk to go with him, but certainly there'll be repercussions in the percentage of sides after Kelly's big performance. Some people will be sucked in, but I'm saying just hold fire. Let's see what he does with a full Giants midfield in there. He may prove me wrong because he is a supremely talented player, but let's just wait and see. Moving on to our next game, the Dogs taking on Melbourne. Lukey Dalhouse does what he does. You'll get that week in, week out from him. 27 touches, 8 tackles, 2 goals. What more can you say? That's exactly why we're going to pick him and exactly why I feel he's a must-have. Rob Murphy and Johannesson racked up with 16 touches, provided a nice run and rebound off the half-back line. You know, I think they're going to be guys who'll be in a moderate amount of sides. I think they'll be consistent scorers, probably around your 90 mark, 85 to maybe 95 if I'm getting generous. I'm probably still going to need to be convinced a little bit. So for mine, they showed a little bit, but probably not enough. But let's just wait and see. Probably a lot of people are getting excited about Murphy. I would probably steer clear. I'd be considering Johannesson a little bit more. Bear in mind that Murphy is in the twilight of his career and has really never shown unbelievable signs of going huge over a consistent season, 22 games in SuperCoach, where Johannesson is showing glimpses and he's younger. So if you're picking either of them, I'd go for JJ more so. McRae, 56% game time, 13 touches. Do yourself a favour and put him in your side. I personally think Dalhouse and McRae are no-brainers. Tommy Boyd didn't look flash, only had the 5 touches, 10 hit-outs, and Cloak was a dominant forward on the ground. So at this stage, we've got Boydie sort of playing second fiddle in 2 positions, in the ruck and in the forward line. That's a little bit concerning. I think his idea of a prospect in our SuperCoach teams was good when he was the main man in attack and then could get you a little bit extra points by going in the ruck. I'm not too sure. He looked a little bit more like the home and away Tommy Boyd, not the finals Boyd. But again, let's not read too much into it. But I think for a player like Boyd, you really do need that little bit of assurance and a little bit more of runs on the board through the pre-season. You know, when you're picking your premiums, bugger their stats throughout this time of year. Who cares? You pick them on their past performance. Where Boyd is a bloke that we probably need to be given a little bit of confidence to pick him, and he didn't give us that on the weekend. So monitor that. Jordan Roughhead did go down. At this stage, I don't feel like there has been a final answer on what that extent of the injury is. I know he's gone in for scans. It didn't look good, but we'll have to wait and see. That could be something that alters Boyd's role, so track that. As for the Ds, Gawn did what he does best. Massive hit-out numbers, 26 from just your 59% game time, 13 touches and a goal. Moved really well. Certainly if you're a Gawn owner and were having any concerns of him backing it up, he certainly looked the goods on the weekend. Other than that, there weren't any enormous takeaways from the Ds. Of course, Hibberd didn't play. We'll wait and see on him. But certainly not really SuperCoach relevant, but Viney, Brayshaw, Oliver. Gee, that's going to be a fantastic contested ball lineup in the Ds midfield for some time. Throwing Petrarca there at some stage. Gee, they're going to look good. I mean, they're just beasts. They're all young. They're all on the rise. Look fantastic. So something to get excited there as a D's fan. Let me just turn my page here. Got plenty of players' names written down as we make our way into the last couple of games. Sydney versus North Melbourne. And this was perhaps the biggest talking point of the weekend, and that was Callum Mills and Isaac Heaney. So much talk about what these guys could be given midfield time, and gee, did they deliver. Looked fantastic. Both won plenty of inside ball. I think it was about 9 contested possessions each. Mills had 29 touches, Heaney 23. Heaney was definitely the standout for me. I didn't watch the game, but I've seen a few highlights, followed it closely, and attended a lot of centre bounces. Looked really good, looked real, assured in that midfield role. Callum Mills, again, I can't really say too much on it because I didn't see the game. I was at work. 29 touches, fantastic, but interestingly, no tackles, no clearances. So, by all reports, did play midfield and a little half back, but maybe there's a question mark about his real inside beast just yet. Now, there was a lot of talk about no second-year blues for Mills, so I certainly think that will be the case. But I guess a question could be raised, is he going to be physically ready to dominate in the midfield? I definitely think Heaney's the one in front of him, and I think Heaney's a fantastic selection. Mind you, Josh Kennedy, Dan Hennebury, Luke Parker all took a backward step on the weekend. They really just stood back, played off the wings, let the young guys, your George Hewitts, your Nick Newmans, and of course Heaney and Mills, Longmire's just seeing what he's got there, seeing what he's got in his next tier, and I think Heaney is certainly the front runner to break into the next bracket. Obviously Mitchell left the club, position available. Kieran Jack McVeigh maybe also drift a little bit less in that genuine midfield rotation. Should be time in there for Mills, but I think Heaney's the one you really want to be looking at. Let's not be concerned about the fantastic Sydney trio of Kennedy, Hanbury and Parker. They were just rolling around for a bit of a Sunday stroll, so don't be too fazed by that. It was all about the young guys. They certainly impressed us, so monitor them closely. Moving on to the North Melbourne Footy Club. Now, Higgins. Surely not. Surely I'm not bringing this up. And I'm not. Let's not be crazy here. Shawnee Higgins, 21 touches, 1 goal, just a 69% game time. The stats read nicely, but let's not be silly, guys. Let's not get drawn into this Shaun Higgins bloody debacle. I mean, he's priced very similarly to Heaney from memory, and it's a no-brainer. No-brainer. If you're going around that price range, you're looking at your Heaney, you're looking around your Wingard, you're looking to upgrade to your caddy. It's as simple as that. Higgins cannot be trusted. He is a bit of a tease, and let's just not be silly. Certainly bear in mind that it's just not a great decision to be putting your trust in Shaun Higgins. I think the Roos definitely have some real interest in their younger players though. And Vickers Willis, I would be not surprised if he is one of the best defender cash cows we get throughout this season. He's looked the goods. He's a very versatile player. Had a long-term injury, I think, last year, possibly the year before, but he has returned. Reasonably high draft pick. By all reports, a very professional young man. When I was reading about him in the draft back in the day, I think he's a guy who will slot in nicely to North Melbourne's side, and I think at 123k he should be considered by all players and all coaches. Hibbard didn't do too much on the stat sheet, but he only played the 54% of game time, so it's worth noting. Had the 12 touches, turned it over a little bit, but probably better for the run. Nathan Rovat, I was reading in the Herald Sun today, they have your little SuperCoach must-have or the takeaway point in their little scoreboard. Had Rovat as, if he's not in your side already, he must be now. I don't know who's writing that and what sort of garb they're producing, but do not take that advice on board. Do not put Rovat in your side. He's 300k. Yes, he played a good game, but there's far better options than Nathan Rovat. And I'm a big fan of Rovat. I watched him play plenty of VFL footy, and I think he's a very good player. But let's not get carried away with this mid-price madness. I mean, do not go reading that and put him in your side. I mean, there's certainly far better options. And personally, as you know, if you listen regularly, I'm not a fan of putting mid-prices in your midfield. Otherwise, Braden Pruce, if I'm saying that right, pretty much shone in the absence of Goldstein. We'll have to wait and see how he lines up with Goldie in the side, but I would definitely think that Goldstein, if he does get a JLT Community Series game into him, would just ruck solo, and Bruce would be a backup, because we all know that Goldstein likes to have the ruck on his own, and I couldn't see that changing despite his good performance on the weekend. Lastly, we'll move our way onto Gold Coast and Brisbane, and while we're talking rucks, let's discuss the Stephen Martin Archie Smith conversation. And that was probably the only thing that concerned me from my point of view with my SuperCoach side over the whole weekend. Pretty much settled. I haven't touched my side in 2 weeks. You shuffle a couple of rookies, but as far as on-field players, haven't touched it for a long time. But Martin got me thinking. Now, they both pretty much shared the game, played 46 and 54% game time respectively. Martin's stats, 13 hitouts, 8 touches, 2 goals. Smith, 27 hitouts, 11 touches, played the more ruck role. I guess that Smith is being thrown around with a bit more of an experimental thought process with Fagan, and no doubt he impressed at times late last year. I do feel that Martin still is the main man. I certainly think he's still the main man. I'd love to see, as the Lions play a couple more games, where that setup does take us, because to be honest, whether Martin's the first ruck or second ruck, not a thought process as far as I'm concerned. The real concern is if Martin is a sole ruck. If Smith is in that side, I'm pretty confident we cannot go with Martin. He cannot be sharing it with young Archie Smith. I think that's something we're going to monitor. Martin's been quite popular. I think he represents value. He'll be the number one man, that's for sure. They're not going to go crazy throwing Martin forward for a young guy in Smith, but let's just track whether they're going to share it a little bit, because I think that's probably going to be a little bit concerning, but that could be something to monitor. Rockcliffe barely got out of first gear, looked fantastic. I'll say it here, I'll get round to his player profile at some stage, but I reckon he will be a top 3 mid this year. So hopefully you've listened deep enough through this podcast here, that little gem. I've been talking for a while, but I do feel that he could string together a consistent year with his body, and we could see a 120 plus season from Rockcliffe, and I reckon he should be in your side. So something there for you. McCluggage, he's all class, 65% game time, 14 touches, likely starter for the Lions midfield. I feel he's a little bit pricey, but he is all class. He's probably not going to win enormous numbers, but what he does with it is great. He's composed, fantastic player, will be one for our teams for many years to come. Aaron Hall dominated, 33 touches, 13 contested, 9 clearances, 11 inside 50s. But let's not be silly. He's not going to be a premium. Let's not get carried away with that. Some Gold Coast absentees: Jared Lyons, Gary Ablett, Jared Halbrow, Trent McKenzie, Jack Scrimshaw and Peter Wright. So a couple of guys from the midfield, but their midfield was pretty impressive with Tuke Miller, David Swallow, Michael Barlow. I mean, Miller had the 24, 10 contested, 7 inside 50s, plenty of clearances. He'll be tempting a few. He's not going to tempt me. I just don't feel that he'll go big enough. You can listen to my Gold Coast preview in regards to him, but certainly he's looking like a very solid player and will certainly improve his numbers. How much is probably a decision for the coach himself. Barlow, good numbers, but we're not going to select him. David Swallow, 15 touches from your 53% game time. Got through well. Apparently Eade says he's going to play sort of your wing, midfield, half forward role. Probably a rotation around there. I think obviously more so in your midfield depending on his fitness. So I think at this stage, if you're an owner of Swallow, you'll be quite happy with what he produced. Jack Bowers, 60% game time, 11 touches. Didn't see this game, so hard to judge the young guys, but I think Ainsworth was quite quiet, as was Brody. Bahow's, it's hard to say. I didn't see the game, but racked up a few touches, played just over half the game. So there you go, guys. That's a wrap up. Plenty of names. I tried to keep it concise as possible. Obviously, it's not great to have a real long, sort of winded podcast, but again, I feel like it's worth talking about. If you really enjoy your SuperCoach like myself, I quite like listening to lengthy podcasts if they're quality. I feel like this was a reasonable wrap, talking about plenty of guys, didn't go in depth as much as I could, but obviously we can't be here for hours on end. So certainly a few names, a few stats for you to think about, a few guys to maybe put on your radar, a couple of guys to maybe take off the radar. So let me know your thoughts, if there was anything that I missed or a few guys that really caught your eye that I didn't touch on. And as always, subscribe to the channel. We're roaring past 500, which is absolutely fantastic. I've been wrapped with the response from that area. I mean, it's really going up really well. More player profiles to come as well. We're probably about halfway through those, at least the list I've got. There'll be a few more to come, but I think after each weekend I'll look to recap the JLT Community Series weekend. And yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Again, bit of a lengthy one, apologies, but hopefully I'll put a few good names and a few good thoughts out there for you. Give the video a like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you guys soon.